pescoço. Pescoço. Aí 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, lateral. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aí puxa o pescoço aqui, ó. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Outro lado. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Atrás. 1, 2, 3. Pra frente. 2, 3, 4. Aí girando o braço. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 a lateral. Aí 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, outro lado. Aí 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, embaixo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, outro lado. Aí 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, na frente. Bota o cotovelo na frente do chão. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, atrás. 2, 3, 4, 5. Vira de lado pra lá, pro fundo do espelho. Cabeça no joelho. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Aí, dobra o joelho. Aí a mão vai lá pra cima. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Outro lado. Aí. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ei. O joelho vai pra cima. É 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Isso. Chicote. Aí, botou. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Outro lado. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Isso. Aí deixa, abaixa. Aí coloca o cotovelo no chão, vai. 1. Você vai levantar o 2, 3, 4, 5. Aí. Esquerda, sai pra lá, perna esquerda. Aí. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aí a cabeça encosta lá. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Outro lado. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A cabeça encosta. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Isso. Aí afasta as pernas. Fecha o pé assim. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aí senta. É lateral. Aí 1, 2, 3, 4. E outro lado. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aí na frente. Aí. Vai. Máximo que coisa. Aí 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Abre o braço. Olha pro lado. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aí. Junta os pés. Aí pega no pé. 1, 2, 3, 4, Aí gangorra lá atrás, vai. Dois. Aí joga para um lado, esquerdo. Joga para o direito. Aí na frente. Mais uma vez. Vai. Frente. Esquerda. Direita. Volta. Aí. Aí. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Puxa o pé. Aí 1, 2, 4, 5. Estica. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aí, do lado. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Contrário. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Puxa o pé. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Esticou. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aí, borboleta. Aí. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aí bota a esquerda atrás aqui. Encosta a cabeça no joelho, vai. Aí 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Vai na frente aqui agora. Estica a perna de baixo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do lado. Cabeça no joelho, vai. 2, 3, 5. Esticou. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aí bota as duas pernas para trás. Aí alonga para trás. Olha para cima. 2, 3, 4, 5. Vai lateral, olha para a esquerda. Aí a direita. Aí recua. Bota o braço esquerdo para mim. Direito. Aí estica. Vamos levantar e vamos fazer aquela abertura lateral, tá? Aqui, ó. Posição para levantar, vai. 2, 3, 4, 5. Aí, segura. Dois, 3, 4, 5. Mais uma outra lá atrás da mão. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Isso. Agora abertura lateral, fica aqui atrás. Aí a linha. Te ajuda? Bem em cima da linha. Jogou, né? Puxa aqui. Ajeita o pé aí atrás. Isso. Isso. Aí outro lado. Ajeita o pé.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Aí na frente. Vamos soltando. Aí, braço. Vai, puxa.
1, 2,
10 segundos.
3, vai pra frente. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Fazer não, né? Tá bom? Levanta a perna agora. Aí. 1, 2, 3. Pro lado. 1, 2, 3. Vira de lado. Aí. 1, 2, 3. Outro lado. Isso. Aí. 1, 2, 3. Aí a gente espera complementar. Mais equilíbrios. Primeiro eu vou mostrar.
I'm going to talk a little bit about a fighter's stance. It's important to divide your body. Don't put too much weight on your front leg, and don't put too much weight on your back leg. You want your center of gravity and weight to be right between your legs. It has to be in the middle. When it comes to your guard, you have a little more leeway. If your opponent is outside of striking range, you can keep your hands a little lower. But if he moves into striking range, you want to elevate your arms because there is more danger. And when you elevate your arms, it is important to tighten your stomach for protection. Now from the side. When you establish your stance, you can keep your heel flat on the mat, or you can elevate it off the mat. Both work. The important part is that you stay centered. You don't want to lean too far backward, and you don't want to lean too far forward. If you lean too far forward, it makes it very difficult to retreat or attack. For the ultimate mobility, you must maintain an even base. When you do this, you can punch or kick whenever you see an opening. When in competition, a lot of fighters will put their center of gravity forward. But in my style, we place our center of gravity in the middle because it provides a great amount of distance between my opponent and me. If I lean forward, my opponent can throw a punch and hit me very easily. Now if I place my center of gravity in the middle, my opponent can no longer punch me. Again, if I put my weight forward, I have sacrificed my defenses. That is why you don't want to fight leaning forward. It becomes so easy for your opponent to hit you. If I keep my center of gravity in the middle, my opponent will have to move forward in order to hit me. This is very important. You always need to maintain that distance. Never put your face in the line of fire. Centering your weight between your legs also allows you to kick and strike with ease. Adopting and getting comfortable with a proper stance is very important in both karate and fighting. Now I'm going to show some basic footwork that can be used in combat. First, forward movement. Every time I move forward, I move the front leg first. For example, if my left leg is forward, I'm going to step with my left leg first. The most important thing is that you don't cross your legs. If you cross your legs, your opponent will see you are vulnerable and strike, causing you to lose balance and fall over. You never want to cross your legs unconsciously. You can cross your legs, but it must be a conscious movement and done at the right moment. It has to be done for a specific reason, to accomplish a particular goal. Same thing, your base always has to be balanced, your center of gravity between your legs. When you do this, you can move forward, backward, lateral, lateral, front, back, lateral, lateral. It all comes very easy. You always have to track your opponent's movement. Always maintain that distance. When he makes a movement, I make a counter movement. It is very important to always react to your opponent's movement and keep the fight on your terms. Now I show Thai Sakbaiki, or footwork techniques. The first movement is the outside pivot. This technique is important because it not only allows you to avoid an opponent's straight attack, but it also puts you in a position from which to launch a counterattack. Once you do the pivot like this, you can throw a strike. However, it is very important that you don't lean back as you pivot. You want to keep your original stance, keep your center of gravity between your legs. As long as you do this, you'll be placed into an excellent position to counter. Now from the side. As I pivot, I maintain my original stance, putting me in a perfect spot to launch a counterattack. Here I do the same outside pivot from the opposite side.
Oh.
Continuing with Thai Sakbaiki, I show how to avoid an opponent's linear attack by switching your stance. Here I begin with my left foot forward. Notice how my center of gravity is still in the center. Again, this is super important because I do not need to shift my weight forward or backward to employ movement, which prevents me from telegraphing my actions. This escape is very important because it allows you to change your stance. I start with my left foot forward, but after executing the counter, I have my right foot forward. The opposite side. In order to make use of this counter, it is very important that you feel comfortable from both a standard stance and a southpaw stance. If you haven't mastered both stances, then it will be hard to make the most out of this technique and others like it. Your counterattacks will be more limited. When you counter, you can do so with either a kick or punch. The most important thing is that you switch your stance and escape your leg. This is another excellent technique for avoiding an opponent's strike and then countering with a strike of your own. The most important thing here is the leg escape. Now I demonstrate how to do a two-pivot movement. From your fighting stance, you first execute the pivot we just covered. After the first pivot, your opponent continues to attack, and you execute a second pivot to again evade his strike. This second pivot is a little more complicated. It demands a little technique. But if you dedicate time to practicing it, you'll begin to use it with ease. One pivot, now the second pivot. The counterattack is optional. You can escape and then attack with a punch or kick, but the most important part is to execute both pivots and evade your opponent's relentless attack. Just as with the previous technique, you're going to end up with your opposite leg forward. I started with my left foot forward, and I ended after both pivots with my right leg forward. Although this might be a little hard to manage when first starting out, utilizing movements such as these will confuse your opponent. No matter how hard he attacks, he won't be able to find you because you're always one step ahead, always cutting angles.
Push.
2 pivots in the counterattack. One more time. A little more loose now, a little quicker. Now I demonstrate how to take 2 backward steps and then execute a pivot, a combination of movements that comes in handy against an advancing opponent. As always, you want to have correct posture and a strong base. You want your guard to be up for protection. Now when you take each step backward, you want to combine it with a strike to prevent your opponent from overrunning you. That strike will help you maintain distance and slow your opponent's advance. So you take 1 step, another step, and then pivot. One more time. 1, 2, pivot. You never want to take more than 2 steps backward. 2 steps is your limit. Always 1 step, your second step, pivot. This is to maintain distance and prevent my opponent from rushing forward. It's meant to slow his attack. After executing the pivot, you can counter with a punch or kick. Simple movements. Notice how as I step back, I strike with my lead arm. Now we'll do it a little quicker, as if I were fighting. This technique is very similar to the previous one in that you take 2 steps backward and then pivot. However, with this technique, you pivot on your rear leg, which takes you in the opposite direction and reverses your stance. 2 steps back and then pivot in the opposite direction. So, 1, 2, pivot.
Dois steps, saindo.
So you take 2 steps and then you exit to the opposite side. Now I will show you a little faster. Now I'll show you a simple movement that you can use to close the distance between you and your opponent. Normally when you move, you step the foot that is closest to the direction that you want to head. For example, if you want to go forward, you step first with your lead foot. If you want to move back, you step first with your back foot. If you want to move to the right, you step your right foot first, and if you want to move to the left, you step your left foot first. However, with this technique you break that rule, but you do so with a specific goal in mind, which is to close the distance without telegraphing your movement. You are conscious of your actions. So I step my rear foot up to my lead foot, and then I push off my rear foot to shoot my lead foot forward. As always, I slide my rear foot along to maintain my fighting stance. Once I land my first strike, I will follow up with the combination. What is important here is how I close the distance using footwork. If I am farther away, then I can push off harder and cover more distance. But because I step with my back leg first, I do not telegraph my movement. My rear leg is hidden and I do not bounce my head. He cannot see me coming. I will demonstrate one more time. With this technique, you can cover a little distance or you can cover a lot of distance. This is another way to cover distance, but instead of stepping, I simply push off my rear foot and shoot my lead foot forward. As always, I slide my rear foot along to maintain my stance. This footwork allows you to make a very quick attack. Now I'll demonstrate how to put all the footwork techniques I've shown together into fluid movement. Leg movement, attacks, pivots, Now I do all the free movement with an opponent.
Vai mostrando. Movimentação. Movimentação. Pivô. Pivô. Segundo pivô. E eu taco. Sai pra trás e volta aí.
Now I'll show how to throw a rear round kick to your opponent's head. There are a number of ways that you can throw this kick. You can do an open movement, or you can do the kick a little more closed and tight. It's up to you. Notice how I rotate my hips and pivot on the ball of my lead foot to generate power for the kick. A little open, now closed. Open, closed. Mohashi Giri is the name of this strike. Closed and tight. Open. Closed. Now I'll show how to throw a rear round kick to strike your opponent's abdomen. Again, your kick can be more open or it can be tighter and closed. Open. Closed. Open, closed. A little open, closed. Open, closed. Open, closed. When my kick is wider, then I strike my target using the ball of my foot. When my kick is tighter, then I strike my opponent's ribs using my shin. When I throw the kick open, I strike my opponent's kidney using the ball of my foot. When I kick tight or less wide, I strike my opponent's ribs using my shin. It is different.
Se estou chutando fechado, não. Fechado, vou lutar aqui, ó.
I'm using my shin instead of the ball of my foot.
Diferente.
Now I show how to throw a rear round kick at your opponent's legs. Just as when you throw a round kick to your opponent's head or kidney, you have two ways to throw the kick. The first one is with your shin, and the second one is with the ball of your foot. When you kick using the ball of your foot, even though it doesn't have as much power, it can still cause just as much damage because the surface area of your weapon is smaller. Same thing. Shin, ball of your foot. 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 The nice part about kicking with your shin is you can get more reach out of your kick. When you kick with your shin, you can throw your kick upward and then come down on your opponent's leg, or you can throw it straight in. When you kick using the ball of your foot, you want to hit and then move away quickly. It is a very fast strike that has a fast recovery. Kicking with your shin is slower and takes more time to recover from. Now we'll show you Kizame Mawashi, which is a lead round kick. When training this kick, it is very important not to telegraph your movement. For example, if you lean dramatically forward as you throw the kick, your opponent will spot it coming and defend against it. The goal is to surprise your opponent with the kick by just moving your leg. With this kick, you can strike a number of different targets. You can strike your opponent's head, his stomach, his leg.
Mesma coisa.
As I've already said, it is very important not to move your body when you throw the kick.
Você está aqui. Aqui mesmo chuta. Por quê?
If you move your body, your opponent will defend against the kick. If I move when I throw the kick, my opponent defends against the kick. If I don't move my body, he doesn't see the kick and I accomplish my goal.
Ele não viu o golpe. Ele não viu o golpe. Então,
when you throw kicks, you always want to utilize your hips. You don't want to kick using the muscles in your leg. Always the hips.
isso aqui está errado.
It is also important not to get in the habit of stepping and kicking.
Porque também eu não
It is
posso
okay to
fazer
do that, to utilize a step,
step para
but you
chutar.
must do so
Não
consciously.
que eu não possa fazer. Eu posso até utilizar o step.
It has to accomplish a specific goal.
Eu saiba que eu estou fazendo. Eu estou aqui.
Here I do the kick with a step, a little
Posso
step.
fazer o step.
A lot of fighters will attempt to switch their stance to put their lead leg behind them, which allows them to throw a more powerful kick. But doing this habitually can also get you in trouble.
Mais uma vez.
If I switch my stance without thinking, my opponent can use my movement to come forward and punch me in the face.
Se eu tô afim de, se eu quero, mesma
If you
coisa,
want
se
to
eu quero
change your
trocar de
stance,
base,
it's best to
se eu
back away
afastar,
from your opponent,
aí eu
change your
posso
stance, and then come forward again.
perigoso. Trocar de base aqui, eu vou trocar com o Ó, perigoso. Então, por isso que não usa isso.
Kick straight.
Direto. Usa
Use your hips.
seu quadril. Aqui. Aqui. Usa o corpo.
One more time. When I change my base while in striking range, my opponent strikes me.
Ele entra. Um pouquinho rápido. Espera aí. Pode ficar um pouquinho longe.
The proper way is to throw the kick without moving your body forward or backward. Just throw the kick and surprise your opponent.
Agora eu vou mostrar
Now I will demonstrate the front kick, or maigiri.
conhecido como maigiri.
When executing this kick, you don't want to push your foot into your opponent. You want to snap your foot into your target. To accomplish this, I push off my rear leg,
Empurrado, tá?
draw my heel toward my buttocks, and then rocket the ball of my foot into my target.
Como eu vou mostrar
Drawing your heel up to your buttocks is very important, as is using your hips to generate power.
esse movimento. E usar o quadril.
Notice how I move my hips forward with the kick instead of rotating them in a clockwise direction as I would when throwing a round
Por
kick.
exemplo, eu não posso chutar assim.
If you rotate your hips circularly, you will fall forward and lose all power behind your strike. You want to drive your hips forward as you kick.
O movimento tem força.
When you kick, hip movement is the most important thing. With the front kick, you want to lift your leg without moving your torso. You want to drive your hips forward instead of rotating them circularly.
Sem movimentar o corpo.
Once again, elevating your heel up to your buttocks is very important for generating power in your kick.
Porque você está levando o quadril ao contrário. Ó, assim, não assim. Aqui.
Now I'll demonstrate Kazami Margari. Kazami means front leg, and Kazami Margari means the front kick with the front leg. All the rules that apply to the rear leg front kick apply to the lead leg front kick. Again, you don't want to sink your torso backward, but rather keep your hips forward and your stomach tight. Your hips stay forward. You can sink low with this strike, or you can kick mid-range.
Baixo. Porque o golpe
Again, drawing your heel up towards your buttocks is very important.
é muito importante.
You do not want to push your foot into your target. You must hit your target. Sometimes you can push to maintain distance, but that is a different kick.
Não. Você tem que bater.
With this kick, you want to strike your target, and this is accomplished by drawing your heel up to your buttocks and keeping your hips straight. Now we'll show Kiza Magari. It is still a front kick with the lead leg, but now you take a step before kicking. One step forward with your rear foot, and then kick. The step is a small one.
Só uma puxadinha. Rápido, rápido.
Just a little fast step to cover distance when your opponent is not within range. In this situation, there is a good deal of distance between me and my opponent. I want to kick, but he's too far away. So I take a small step and then kick. Always use your hips.
Puxa pouquinho.
If your opponent is too far away, take a small step. It cannot be a big step. You don't want to step your rear foot in front of your lead foot. If you do, you'll be off balance and your opponent will enter and counter.
De novo. Step, ó.
Just a small step.
Quando eu fizer o step, tu entra. Curto. Step curto.
This technique is called Yoki Garikomi, or side kick. With this kick, you must begin just as you did with the front kick, by elevating your heel towards your buttocks and then drawing your knee forward. However, once you have elevated your knee, you turn to the side and drive the blade of your foot into your opponent's abdomen or face. Once you have completed the kick, you turn your body and drop your foot to the canvas, changing your stance. The side kick can also be used to strike your opponent's thigh. It is a very versatile strike in that you can kick the legs, the body, and the head.
De cima para baixo. Deixa eu bater primeiro.
When throwing the side kick, it is very important to pay special attention to your movement. You don't want to rotate your body too early. Remember, the kick begins just as the front kick does, by keeping your body erect. Once your knee is up, that's when you turn and drive the blade of your foot into your target.
Depois você vira. Você carrega, vira. Tira.
The side kick is a very versatile kick because it can be thrown from different angles and at different targets. Previously, I threw it to my opponent's stomach, but I can also throw it to his thigh to block his forward movement. It can also be used in combination with other kicks, such as a low kick to your opponent's leg. When you throw a kick and then follow up with the side kick, it is very difficult for your opponent to spot. You can also combine the side kick with a step. Step to one side, and then kick. The technique I will show you now is shiro gari, or spinning back kick. The turn is very important because a lot of people do it wrong. Instead of keeping their entire body unified as they turn, they let their leg float out to the side. This is wrong. You want to keep your leg tight, which allows you to line up your foot with your target. If you let your leg float out to the side as you turn, it is not a spinning back kick. You always want to turn so that you can lash your leg straight out into your target. Always. I will show it from another angle. Same technique. I keep everything tight as I rotate so that I can line my foot up with my target. If you keep your body united as you rotate, and then keep your feet together, you'll have little trouble hitting your target. One more time I will show the kick. Keeping your legs together is very important. This movement is very important. You cannot let your leg float out to the side when you turn. In addition to making it more difficult to hit your target, you're also in danger of your opponent kicking you in the groin. That is why it's so important to keep everything tight and close. It helps your offense as well as your defense. I will apply the kick now. First, normal. Now I will apply the spinning back kick to counter my opponent's forward movement. Here I will use the same spinning back kick to counter my opponent's round kick. You can even use the spinning back kick to counter your opponent's jab. Now I will kick my opponent's leg to distract him, and then rotate and throw the spinning back kick. Here I use it again to counter my opponent's movement. When you set this technique up with other strikes, it is a very high percentage move.
Mostrando ainda.
It is also important to note that you can execute a jump spinning back kick to cover distance between you and your opponent. But before you attempt this, it is very important to first master the basic movements.
Isso é muito importante. Quando ele movimentar, tá?
Now I'll show you Uwada Marash, or hook kick.
Vou mostrar. O golpe Uramoashi.
Although it's not a very common technique in MMA, it is highly effective. It can be executed with either your front or rear leg. I will show it with the rear leg first. Rotating my body, I elevate my knee toward my chest, move my leg around the outside of my opponent's body, and then curl my heel into my target. When you throw this kick using your front leg, you want to first take a small step forward with your rear foot. Again, rotate your body, move your leg around the outside of your opponent's body, and then snap your heel back into your target. So, small step, and then the kick.
Perna da frente. Pequeno step. Pequeno step. Perna de trás. Perna da frente. Pequeno step.
This can be a very sneaky kick, especially when you pretend to throw a low roundhouse kick to your opponent's lead leg. However, instead of actually landing the kick, you board at the last instant, move your leg around to the opposite side of your opponent's body, and then snap your heel into his face. When you do this kick with your lead leg, you can also lower your opponent's lead hand by grabbing it and pulling it down. This makes it very difficult for your opponent to block your kick. So, you lower your opponent's hand, take a small lateral step, and then deliver the kick. It makes your opponent think you're going to kick low, and then you kick high. Now I'm going to show you I Shirudo Udomash, or spinning hook kick. With this attack, it is very important that you use your rotation to generate power for the kick. Unlike the spinning back kick, you let your leg float away from your body. It is an open kick in which you make a circle with your leg. With this kick, you want to strike your target using your heel. You want to connect with the back of your heel. If you make contact with the top of your foot, it will have no power. You must use your heel to ensure that you cause your opponent damage. If you throw this kick as a single strike attack, it has the potential of landing, but your chances of connecting solidly with your target go way up when you throw it after a combination. The first strikes in your combination distracts your opponent and spreads his focus thin, allowing you to sneak the kick in unanswered. It is a very dangerous kick because during your rotation, you generate a lot of momentum, which in turn creates a very forceful impact. When you land it clean, your opponent is guaranteed to be in pain. Now I'll show you Hi Dunguri. It is considered a double kick because you use both legs, but with the first movement, all you do is lift your knee. In order for it to be effective, you want to lift your knee quite high in your initial movement. So you lift one knee and then execute a front kick with your opposite leg. The first movement is to begin to charge towards your opponent, to get your momentum moving forward and to close the distance. Charge and kick.
Carrega e chuta.
Charge and kick.
Carrega e chuta.
With the second kick, you can target your opponent's face or stomach. It depends upon the openings available.
Ou no rosto, ou na barriga.
Now we'll show it again.
Tá? Depende onde o local. Isso.
Charge your kick by elevating your knee, and then strike.
Pega o joelho, entra.
Charge your knee, keep your hips center, move your hips forward, and then kick. It is a very long kick, so you don't want to be in close range with your opponent.
Assim, ó.
Once you elevate your knee, you can kick your opponent's face or stomach.
Vamos mostrar agora golpe.
Now we'll demonstrate a kick where you throw it towards the outside of your opponent's body, but then at the last minute, you change its path and kick to the inside of your opponent's body.
É golpe que ele sai aqui, ó, e entra por dentro.
There are two ways to throw this kick. The first method is the kick using the top of your foot and a little bit of your shin. The second method is the kick using the ball of your foot.
A outra você chutar usando o bico,
You can kick using the top of your foot or the ball of your foot.
usando essa parte do pé. Tem duas formas, certo? Solta. Ou bico.
Once you land the kick, you want to get out of the way to avoid a counterattack.
Bem,
Now I'll demonstrate ashibarai, which is a sweeping technique or takedown.
raspar o adversário ou de derrubar. O ashibarai é um movimento
It is a simple
simples, mas
movement,
que
but in
exige
order to be
pouco
effective with it, you have to use it with proper
estratégia
technique and timing.
para ser eficientemente usado.
With this technique, your weapon is the bottom of your foot. You execute the sweep using the bottom of your foot. It can also be executed with either your front or rear foot.
Ou com a perna da frente. De trás
Back or front.
ou frente. Mais uma vez.
One more time, back or front.
Ou frente. Perna de trás ou frente.
The goal with this technique is to destroy your opponent's base by attacking his front leg. If your opponent has his weight on his front leg, it will be very difficult to sweep him. In order to be effective with the sweep, you must first take his weight off his front leg. To accomplish this, I throw a punch.
Agora sim, ó. Volta.
As he shifts his weight backward to defend against the punch, I execute the sweep and destroy his base.
Ou também pode
You can
ser
also
usado
execute
com a
this
perna de
technique with your
trás,
back foot.
fazendo pequeno step.
If your opponent is close, then you can execute the technique the instant he shifts his weight onto his back leg. If he is farther away from you, I make a small step to close the distance and assume a more dominant angle of attack. I force my opponent to take his weight off his front leg, and then I execute the sweep. Get his weight off his front leg, and then sweep. One more time from another angle. Get the weight off his front leg, and then sweep. When I strike my opponent to get him to shift his weight backward, I can use either my front or rear arm. I can throw a jab, or I can throw a cross. The most important thing is to force him to take his weight off his lead leg, which can be done with either your lead or rear arm.
Isso. Ou usando o braço de trás, tirando a perna da frente. Ó.
Now we'll spar with my brother Shinzo using the techniques I demonstrated throughout this section. Punching is a fundamental part of karate. It is very important to pay special attention to the details because after you learn the movements involved, you will repeat them thousands of times. To start out, we will focus on the very basics. So stand with your feet roughly a shoulder's width apart and place your fists on your hips.
Inicialmente, a forma básica do movimento, ela começa com as duas mãos na cintura.
Next, extend your arms forward and rotate your fist so that your palms are facing the mat and your thumbs are facing one another. This rotation is very important because it dramatically increases the strength of your punches. When you strike your target, you want to do so using the knuckles of your index and middle fingers. Not only are these knuckles stronger, but it allows you to transfer energy down your arm, out your first two knuckles, and into your target.
Essa virada aqui é muito importante, o movimento básico. Por que no centro sempre? Porque se você fica assim,
it is also very important to strike toward the center of your opponent's body, not the outside.
Sem alvo.
The center is where all his vulnerable areas are.
Então aqui o centro.
Once you get comfortable extending both arms, rotating your fists so that your palms are facing the mat, and connecting with your imaginary target using the first two knuckles of your hand, practice throwing punches with one arm at a time. Just as before, you want to rotate your hand over just prior to striking your target to generate power in your punch and to minimize the damage you cause your hand. At the end of your punch, rotate your hand. The first punch I will show is Kazami-zuki, or the jab. This strike is executed with your lead arm. When throwing this punch, it is important not to let your elbow drift out to the side because your opponent will see the punch coming and defend against it. It is a straight punch and you want to keep your rear hand elevated to protect your face. To execute the jab, step your lead foot forward and extend your lead arm at the same time. If your opponent advances towards you, you can throw the jab without stepping forward to stop in his tracks, but you generate a lot more power when you combine it with a forward step. The forward step also helps you close the distance.
Outro lado.
The jab can be thrown to your opponent's mouth, his nose, and sometimes his chest. Here I demonstrate how to throw a fake punch with your rear hand in order to set up the jab. So I fake with my rear hand, then throw the jab. Now I demonstrate Gatsuki, or the cross. This strike is thrown with your rear arm. When throwing the cross, it is very important to rotate your hips. This helps generate power. Also, remember that your elbow should not drift out to the side. You want to keep it tight to your body to prevent your opponent from spotting the strike. It is also very important to maintain your base. When you throw this punch, you want to enter with your whole body. If you lean forward in order to land the punch, your balance will be compromised, making it very difficult to follow up with a secondary strike. Again, don't lean forward or it will be hard to follow up with more strikes. Just as with the jab, you can throw the cross after leading with the fake. You can also throw the cross to your opponent's stomach. The cross can follow other strikes as well, such as a kick. There are many ways to set up the cross. You can set it up by throwing a low kick. You can set it up by faking with the sweep. The setup doesn't matter. What matters is that you throw the cross using the proper form. Now I will show you Osuki, the strongest punch in karate. You throw the punch with your rear arm, but you do so as you step your rear leg forward. Why is it the strongest punch? Because you throw the strike with all of your weight moving forward. It's a difficult punch to land on your opponent because it's a very long strike. In order to pull it off, you need to recognize when you have the proper distance, and this takes a sharp mind. If you don't have the distance to step forward, it's also possible to step your lead leg back and then step your rear leg forward to execute the punch. This allows you to use this technique even when you don't have enough distance between you and your opponent. Here's the alternate punch. The two variations are the same punch, but you change your footwork due to the distance between you and your opponent. With the normal punch, there is a good deal of distance between you and your opponent. With the alternate punch, there is less distance. The target for this punch can be your opponent's nose, mouth, whatever you want. It's a strong punch that will cause damage no matter where you land. It is important to keep your opposite arm up for protection. Always keep that arm up. This punch is a finisher, but because you have to cover so much distance, the best time to use it is when your opponent is tired. If he isn't tired, then you really have to push off quickly to cover the distance and land with your target. You can throw this punch from closer, but you have to use the alternate version in order to land. This is a punch that really requires an explosion. If you aren't explosive in your movements, then it won't be effective. As with the other strikes, you can set up this punch by leading with a different technique. This technique is called Moashi Suki, or a hook. Here I show you how to throw the strike with your lead arm. It is important not to do a haymaker punch. If you throw your arm out to the side, your opponent will see it coming and defend against it. Even though the punch approaches its target from the side, you don't want to throw your arm backward to generate power. Now we'll show the hook from the side. It's also possible to take a small step forward and throw the hook. You can even execute a side step and then throw the hook. It's the same strike, but a different variation. If your opponent punches, then you can evade his strike using a side step and throw the hook at the same time. so it can be a very good counter when combined with footwork.
Eu ataco. Tu ataca.
Once again, you do not want to fling your arm way out to the side. And once you throw the strike, exit out to avoid your opponent's attacks.
Dá o segundo. Já estou fora dele. Movimenta. Dois por baixo. Qual que eu irei mostrar agora?
Now I'll demonstrate Mawashi Suki, or overhand, which is a very common punch in karate.
Muito comum nas academias. Ele é conhecido também como.
However, most people open their elbow when they throw this punch, but we do not.
Só que o Mawashi Suki do karatê tem uma grande diferença dentro.
We keep the punch tight until just prior to impact. It isn't until the last moment that we rotate our arm.
Pouco fechado. No final você gira. No final gira.
So at the end of the strike, rotate your arm and strike with the first two knuckles of your hand.
Você vem aqui e gira por cima.
After you hit your target with the punch, you want to back away to avoid counter strikes. And you always want to keep your opposite hand up to protect your face. Now I will show you the uppercut. When you throw this punch, it is very important to use your hips to punch from bottom to top.
Chamada de hook. Você bate de baixo para cima. Muito importante nessa técnica.
To punch from bottom to top, to drive your fist upward into your target. Your opposite hand must stay up to protect your face.
Essa mão de guarda permanece em cima.
This punch can also be executed with your lead arm. In addition to throwing this punch to your opponent's chin, you can also target his stomach. And as I said previously, it can also be thrown with your lead arm. The uppercut can be thrown to your opponent's stomach or his face. Another good time to use the uppercut is when you throw a straight punch and your opponent drops low to shoot in for a takedown. As he lowers his level and comes forward, you throw the uppercut into his face. It is the same punch, but a different application. Now I'll show how to throw 2 uppercuts in a row while backing up. Notice how I strike from bottom to top. Now I'll show you Shihaito, or ridge hand strike. You don't see this punch a lot in other martial arts, but it is utilized quite often in karate. With this technique, your weapon is the ridge of your hand.
Que se usa na hora do choque do golpe, na hora que você vai bater.
Although it's an open hand strike, it can possess a lot of power and cause a lot of damage. It's similar to the overhand strike, but now you keep your hand open. Here my opponent throws a right punch, and I enter using shiaito. I keep my opposite arm up to protect my face. This technique can also be used when you and your opponent are in opposite fighting stances, meaning you have opposite feet forward. The only difference now is that instead of throwing the strike with your lead hand, you use your rear hand. He throws a punch, and I counter with shiaito. The target for this strike is the side of your opponent's jaw and his neck. Now I show kuriki, or spinning back fist. To execute this technique, you trap your opponent's outstretched hand with your lead hand, rotate, and then hit him with the back fist. With this technique, you can utilize two different types of footwork. The first type is to slide your rear leg circularly across the mat as you rotate. The other type is to keep your back leg planted in its original position. The first method is better employed when you need to cover distance, and the second version is best when you're already within striking range. Always open your opponent's guard with your lead hand before executing this technique. This creates an opening for you to land your punch. Now I will spar with my brother using the punching techniques I demonstrated throughout this section. Now we'll show what we call in karate gempi, or over-the-top elbow strike. I'll begin with my rear arm. A lot of people will use a side elbow strike, but we throw the elbow over the top because it makes it a lot easier to strike your opponent's face. If you throw the elbow from the side, it can get hung up on your opponent's arms, so you strike over the top. While executing the strike, make sure to keep your opposite hand up to protect your face.
Mesma coisa com o braço da frente.
It is the same when you throw the strike with your lead arm. Again, it's possible to throw the elbow from the side, but most of the time your opponent's hands will be up, making it difficult to strike him in the face. In addition to this, throwing the elbow from the side makes it easy for your opponent to see it coming, and he can block it with his arms. When you throw your elbow over the top, it is much harder for your opponent to block. You want to throw your elbow right down the middle, right between your opponent's arms. The goal is to crash the tip of your elbow into your opponent's face.
A mão de guarda é muito importante que ela se mantenha em pé.
When you execute this strike properly, the tip of your elbow will slide down your opponent's face and do damage. It probably won't knock him out, but due to the sharpness of your elbow, you will probably open a cut. You don't need to hit deep. As long as you brush your opponent's face with the tip of your elbow, you'll most likely open a cut. Now we'll show the uppercut elbow, which is just as powerful as the previous elbow strike. However, instead of throwing your strike over the top and driving the tip of your elbow down into your opponent's face, you throw it from bottom to top.
Tá? Onde você pode atacar.
It is a very easy strike to apply, but it is best utilized when you are in close range with your opponent. So, you use it when you are in close range. If you are not within close range, then you can utilize a forward step and then throw the uppercut elbow. It can be done with either your lead or rear arm. The uppercut elbow can also be used as a counter when your opponent attacks.
Ou, então,
To do this, you want to throw the uppercut elbow at the same time as you block your opponent's strike. Once more, you can use the uppercut elbow to either attack or defend. In my style, I use this elbow quite a lot as a defense. Every time I block one of my opponent's punches, I throw my opposite elbow upward to strike him in the face. Every time I block, I throw an uppercut elbow with my opposite arm. Always. Now I'm going to show the spinning elbow. As with all spinning attacks, the spinning elbow requires precision and visual control in order to hit your target. You can use this strike as an attack, or you can use it as a counterattack after defending one of your opponent's strikes. No matter how you use it, you must turn fast. It doesn't matter if you use it after countering a punch or a kick. You must quickly rotate or your back will be exposed, making you vulnerable. In addition to throwing the spinning elbow to your opponent's face, you can also throw it to his stomach. If your opponent kicks, you defend the kick and then follow up with the spinning elbow, either to his face or his stomach.
Ou Ou na barriga.
I defend, hit to my opponent's stomach.
Primeiro mostrar no rosto.
Now I go to the face a little faster. Now to the stomach.
Rosto.
Face. Stomach. This is a very dangerous strike because the elbow is hard and sharp. All you need to do is graze your opponent's face and you'll open a cut. Now I show Shirizaguri, better known as the straight knee. This is a linear strike that goes from bottom to top. When you lift your leg off the ground, it's very important to keep your foot pointing downward because it allows you to get more elevation out of your strike. If your foot is bent, you will not be able to bring your knee up as far. It also makes it more difficult to come up onto the ball of your grounded foot.
Ela pode levantar também, tá? Então,
An excellent way to set up this strike is to grab your opponent's lead arm with your lead hand. At the same time, you hook your rear hand around the back of your opponent's head and pull him into your strike. Remember, it's a linear knee. Utilizing hip movement is very important for generating power. If you do not use your hips, your strike will not be as powerful. Now I demonstrate how to cover more distance with the straight knee. To accomplish this, I step my rear foot forward and then throw the strike. To close the distance, you take a small step forward and then throw the knee. It's the same knee strike as the previous one, only now you are taking a step forward. When you are far away from an opponent, it can be very difficult to land a knee strike due to the shortness of your weapon. When I am far, I cannot knee, but after taking a step forward, I can hit my target much easier. However, it is very important that you make a quick step so as not to alert your opponent to your intentions. Now I demonstrate a circular knee, or side knee. The target for this strike will be the side of your opponent's body. Instead of shooting your knee straight into your target, you're going to approach your target from the side. The position of your foot is the same. Always point your toes downward. A lot of times when you are face to face with your opponent, he will be on the lookout for the straight knee. As a result, he leaves the sides of his body wide open. To capitalize on this, I'll open his guard by grabbing his lead arm with my lead hand, enter, and attack his side with the side knee strike. Now I demonstrate the flying knee. To execute this technique, you do two knees, one right after the other. However, you do not need to bring your first knee strike high. It can be used as a fake. So I throw the first knee, enter, and then connect with the second knee. The first knee is a fake to close the distance on my opponent, and then I strike with the second knee. It is important to note that this knee strike, as with all the others, can be executed from a variety of ranges. In this technique, you can determine the range with your first knee strike. If you are far away, then you can throw your first knee farther. If you are close, then your first knee will be a small movement. Whenever you throw this knee, you want to grab your opponent's head and pull it down to meet your strike. Now a little faster. A little closer. Now I'm going to spar with my brother Shinzo using the kneeing techniques we just covered. Now I'm going to spar with my brother Shinzo using all of the techniques we covered.